Hello, fellow duels. This is Shadow of the Moon, and welcome to the Bird's Nest. So, this, in terms of like, this isn't going to be a podcast or anything, and I did do a video about this about like a year or so ago, and thought it was a really interesting idea. So, I'm going to choose to kind of pick it up. May not do it as often, just because I don't have always ever have too much to rant about or too much to kind of discuss, but I thought this would be a fun little discussion topic today. I got my coffee, so this won't be too long. So I wanted to talk about uh generic boss monsters. I did breach this on the last video that I had discussed. Whereas if I felt like the extra deck slot should be increased, you know, so in this video I'm going to be talking about the generic boss monsters that every single deck can pretty much build and put together. Cards like Borreload Savage, Appaloosa, SP Little Knight, IP Masquerena, and Baron de Flor. Should these cards be type limited? And I say that because, decks like Fire King, Snake Eye, Dragon Link, which is perfectly fine in my opinion, but like cards like Fire King, Snake Eye, and everything, Super Heavy Samurai, if you play that even on Master Duel, should be limited. And I kind of do feel, and I actually agree with Paul from Team APS, his video that he ranted about and did a post on. I actually agree with him. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, in this video, and I actually felt like, that was a really good topic to discuss. Yes, I actually feel like they should be limited. Baron de Flor is like the most generic level 10 synchro boss monster in this game right now. It does not take much, and any deck can run it. I mean, you have like Blue Eyes decks, Black Wings, any deck that has any form of synchro summoning, even Snake Eyes, can bring out Baron de Flor. And Baron de Flor not only just pops a card when it's synchro summoned, once per turn, but also has an Omni Negate, which is really good. But at the same time, I feel like it gets overused too much because I feel like too many people rely on these boss monsters, these generic monsters in the extra deck to actually, to win games. So if what I would like to see is maybe not so much like, using like, oh, you would have to use like one non-tuner and then like or Necron Synchron or whatever, or Floor Synchron or something, but something like one tuner warrior monster plus like one non, which I know would kind of like water it down and stuff and make it where it would be as playable. But I honestly don't think like it would be as bad as everyone says it is. Like Borreload Savage Dragon literally does not require anything. It's a level 8 generic synchro monster that lets you equip a link monster to it when it gets synchro summoned, and then it has increases the attack by like half of the level of the monster that you're using for it. Which, if you equip something like a 2100 or something, it becomes like a 4050, and it's like that's pretty good. So it becomes like over a 4th K Omni Negate. And because it was in the rocket structure deck, and that's what made it famous was rocket monsters. I think that it would have been more beneficial to have it be like a rocket, where you have to have like a rocket tuner for it, where if you're playing Dragon Link, you would have easily more access to it because you play, rocket monsters already. But Borreload Savage isn't really necessarily like the worst thing. I actually think out of the main 3 boss monsters and people that use like Baron, Appaloosa, and like, you know Borreload, I think Borreload is like the least problematic, but I still think that maybe a Dragon Tuner or a Rocket Tuner would be more sufficient because it would give the boss monster kind of back its identity, so to speak, for that deck. For having like rocket monsters, a rocket deck, like if you wanted to have a rocket deck, you could be like, oh, well, this is one of my big boss monsters because everybody plays Borreload, like just like with Baron a warrior decks. You don't just play Baron. Everybody plays Baron in warrior decks. Or not in warrior decks. They play it in every deck that you can think of. And I think that even like a wind deck or like a, warrior deck or something that requires a floor deck. I mean, the floor deck was completely abandoned after, its inception in 5Ds where you did have Baroness to Floor, or whatever, which was the first Omni Negate at the time, where it could negate, but you would, in order for you to synchro summon for it, you had to use Necro Synchron or something, or you had to do like the little flower plant thing. It was a machine type, and it was like, but nobody used it because nobody's playing that kind of deck. And I feel like a lot of these extra deck monsters, like these generic monsters, they've lost their identity because they're splashed into just everything. And yeah, I do admit i'm I am guilty of it too. I mean, I have Excel, Stardust, and I have my own Baron in here. But the difference is, like for my deck, I wouldn't mind taking those out. If I had to be locked into dark types, I wouldn't mind taking those out. And even with Dissipator, I wouldn't mind taking out Dissipator because it would mean that they would be given back their identity in terms of like they would actually be more useful in those kinds of decks because you could still play those in like Bestial decks, or you could still play that in a Brocket deck, but it's not as well known and everybody seems to use it. So it's like when you look at your opponent and you're staring them down and you're not playing a, Snake Eyes deck, you're not playing a generic meta deck, you're looking at the same field that you're always looking at. So it gets kind of repetitive, I guess, so to speak, repetitive because you're looking at the same monsters, literally staring you down. And it's more prominent in Master Duel because Master Duel, since they are a little bit behind on the TCG because it's OCG and you also have Maxi in there, most of the decks that you're playing against will always make those generic monsters. So, I would I agree with the idea and the concept and then maybe the prospect even of extra deck monsters kind of getting their ideal back, their way of thinking, their identity. I agree that they could, and I think that it wouldn't ruin the game too much. I actually think that it would make the game a little bit more fair for players, especially people who wanted to play those kinds of decks but didn't have to worry about like price tags. Cards like Appaloosa is the same thing. I think like Appaloosa would have been better if you had to have Fairy because when I first looked at the card, I actually originally did think that you had to have Fairy for linking material, but no, it's literally 2 plus effect monsters. So that's pretty much it. I mean, so you have like this 3200 that can negate once per chain, which can negate multiple times per turn, and can drop, but unfortunately drops its attack by 800 points. But at the same time, it requires literally up to just 2 monsters. I mean, you could link summon using 2 link monsters, and you could get the Omni. You could get a monster effect negate. And I think that it should be more beneficial if it was like Fairy because then decks like Agents or decks that used Fairy types and stuff would benefit more from that and be like, hey, that's my generic boss monster. I could use that. But I don't know. Just tell me what you think. This was something that's been on my mind for a while now, especially ever since I watched the video. But even before then, I've always got the idea. Every time I look at like my extra deck or look at like other decks and stuff, and I'm like, well, these monsters are so easy to bring out. Everybody uses them, and it's like, you know, a lot of these monsters are just like they're not really even in specific types of decks that they should be used. But yeah, just tell me what you think. And this is something I just wanted to kind of talk about because like I said, it had been on my mind for a bit. I talked it with my wife, because we're always talking about a little bit of everything, and that was just one of the things that we had discussed and we brought up. But yeah, so all right, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for coming to the bird's nest today. So cheers, I've got my Resident Evil cup. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, and with that, I'll see you guys next time. Later.